father of George Zimmerman says that Martin beat his son and threatened to kill him.
He was punched in the nose, his nose was broken, and he was knocked to the concrete.
Zimmerman claims Trayvon climbed on top of him and slammed his head into the sidewalk.
In the police station video, you really can't tell whether George Zimmerman looks injured.
Police, I just heard a shot right behind my house.
This was an incident where someone who was just trying to do the right thing ended up in a very, very bad position.
We want justice! We want justice!
They needed to beat George, and at some point, George pulled his pistol and did what he did.
They killed my son, and now they're trying to kill his reputation.
Trayvon's parents deserve answers, and we're going to do our best to give them those answers.
And that was George Zimmerman's father you heard during that piece, speaking to Orlando's WOFL. I want to go out to Frank Taffy, who is joining us tonight. He is George Zimmerman's neighbor in Florida. He's the former Neighborhood Watch block captain. What are you thinking and what are you learning tonight as we are hearing so many different things? But I think one aspect that I really want to focus in on is the fact that the brother of George Zimmerman has shed new light on the gun, because he is saying that the gun was never aimed, pointed, and intentionally to shoot Trayvon Martin, but that Trayvon saw the gun at one point and was telling George Zimmerman that his life was going to be over. In other words, he was going to take that gun and use it, and that's how the self-defense came in.
Well, Gene, thank you for having me on the show. First, I'd like to bring out the fact that Ms. Jackson should be admonished for her unmitigated and baseless rants. I would like to, I'll address your question, but what we're all forgetting about is that before George was taken down to the station, he was administered first aid by an EMT of Seminole County. So when he appears on the video or on the surveillance tape, he had already been treated by the EMTs. Let's not forget about the facts in this case. It's a fact that the EMTs did administer first aid.
Do you know if any pictures were taken? Because one of the issues, we need to know how bad those injuries were.
I understand. Gene, I played football and I've had my nose busted up pretty bad. And you couldn't tell an hour later, 2 days later, that I had a broken nose. You know, George experienced a contusion on the back of his head. Let's elaborate here or delineate between a laceration and a contusion. I'm sure you can bring forth some experts in the medical field, which I am not, but I know the difference between a contusion and a laceration.
All right, well, what about the question I had for you, though? Have you heard anything to substantiate what the brother is saying, that his gun was made public to Trayvon Martin, and that's when the issue... Yes, I heard that story that George's life... Let's go back to the Florida statute. George's life was being threatened. That's when Trayvon, and I heard it not only through the media, but I also heard it from Tracy Martin, Trayvon's father, that initially he heard the same thing. Then who made the excruciating scream? The eyewitness is saying, I heard an excruciating scream.
That was George Zimmerman, my friend, was on the ground and he was being pummeled by a physically fit young black male. George has not played football. The biggest contact sport I believe he ever had was ping pong.
All right, let's go to Cheryl McCullum, crime scene analyst, so experienced in this area. Cheryl, how are they going to find out? There is a cry that is heard.
Sure.
And I think on the 911 call, there are some voices that are heard. How are they going to figure out whose voice that is?
They're going to do a voice stress analysis. They're going to go back and they're going to slow it down and they're going to compare George's voice and Trayvon's voice, and they're going to figure out who this was.
But what if it's a witness? What if it's somebody that's just standing someplace and hearing it, and that's the voice you hear?
You know, again, if they can rule both of the voices, you know, out to not be the two people that we have already identified, that's one thing. But again, this case is going to come down to forensics. I cannot stress that enough. People have got to let the wheels of justice turn, and they turn so slowly sometimes. And, you know, as a mother, I cannot imagine Trayvon's mom having to wait 30-plus days for these answers. There's no excuse in that. But again, what I see on the video is a man being handcuffed, he's patted down, and they are escorting him. That looks standard procedure. In the police report, Gene, it says his back is wet and there's visible injury. Let the evidence come to light. We just have to wait for it, and it's difficult, but you've got to wait, and nobody else needs to be threatened, nobody else needs to have a bounty put on them, and nobody else freaking needs to go to jail.
And it can't be public now because it is an investigation. The public doesn't have a right to know under the law. To John Manuelian, defense attorney out of Los Angeles. But here's the